Welcome back to the SkiBallin Show podcast. It is a new year. It's a new season of the podcast, which means we're back into football. It's kind of a good thing and a kind of a bad thing that we're kind of back at this time. A good thing because we're kind of in the thick of the playoffs, and bad for basically the same reason because we did miss pretty much the entire regular season. But we are back. Football is back here on the SkiBallin Show podcast, and we are ready to jump in. But before we get to the wild card results and the previews of the Divisional Round, we're going to go through some news first. First up on the list is the head coaching jobs and the team's management positions that are switching up. First on the list is the Giants hiring Patriots assistant Joe Judge as their head coach. This comes as a surprise to a lot of fans because, well, not a lot of people know who Joe Judge was on the Patriots. Well, he was the wide receivers coach and the special teams coordinator for the New England Patriots. Now, he was a pretty good special teams coordinator. I can give him that. But a lot of people are also shaking their heads saying, why the wide receiver coach of all guys? Because if you looked at this year, the Patriots wide receivers were kind of terrible. Yes, they were young, and yes, they made a lot of rookie mistakes, but they also had Julian Edelman and Mohamed Sanu, at least midway through the season. So you were kind of thinking, despite the fact that the wide receiver position is not as talented as it once was, it still should have, gotten some games there, here and there where they could have done something and produced for Brady, but that didn't happen. So the Giants hire him as a coach, but to me, I just don't see him being any better or worse than Ben McAdoo or Pat Shurmur, and I just don't see that really happening, unfortunately, for the Giants. It's just, Saquon Barkley had a down year. I know he wasn't fully healthy this season, but I feel like some of those games he could have put in some better runs here and there. His offensive line did a decent enough job to try to create those holes, but ironically enough, the best part of the Giants' offense was actually the passing game. No matter who was passing it to the wide receivers, it would be Daniel Jones and Eli Manning, which is also another question that the Giants need to answer. Where's their quarterback for next year or in the future? So some investments, some things to think about for the New York Giants. On to the Carolina Panthers, who signed Matt Rule as their head coach from Baylor University. Now, I haven't watched a lot of Baylor games to know exactly what Matt Rule is all about with his coaching scheme, but I feel that no matter who is going to take the helm, I felt that after the Carolina season and after they fired Ron Rivera, I believe that the Carolina Panthers just kind of shot themselves in the foot because I feel like Ron Rivera really rebuilt that team. Him and their general manager, who was Dave Gettleman, and I believe that both of them really kind of helped rebuild that Carolina team. That defense became absolutely unstoppable, and then Cam Newton became a 2015 MVP. They went to the Super Bowl. They were 15-1 that season, only losing to the Atlanta Falcons. So I feel that Ron Rivera or the Carolina Panthers getting rid of both Gettleman and Ron Rivera really will change the culture in that Carolina team. And when you change the culture of a team, well, I believe that one head coach won't be the solution to that problem. I think it's going to have to be a multitude of things that have to change the culture, and that starts with GMs and coaches, the relationships with the front office and everything else like that. And I think that the Carolina Panthers are just going to be stuck in this middle point. They're not going to get worse or better for the next, 3 years or so until they know what they want to be as a team. And I think that Christian McCaffrey is just going to have to carry that team for a good amount of time. He and Luke Kuechly will have to basically be the face of that team for a while. And then there's also the question of who's going to be the quarterback. They said that they wanted to trade Cam Newton. Kyle Allen looks like he was not the answer, and I said so before. I did not like Kyle Allen being started as the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. I mean, if you look at his college career, he did the same exact thing that he basically did during the season. He started out great, and then he's lost his head. And then he kept throwing dumb picks, dumb throws, and it's resulted in him getting benched for Matt Greer. Which, funny enough, I was also a fan of Matt Greer in West Virginia when I saw him in college, but then I looked at his tape in the NFL, and I'm like, I don't know about this either. So now the Carolina Panthers have a huge quarterback question on their hands, and there's just a lot of questions that need answering for this Carolina team, and I just don't think all those questions will be solved this season. All right, now let's look into the big fish here. The Dallas Cowboys, they signed Mike McCarthy. 5 years for Mike McCarthy. This is a big deal. Now, the Dallas Cowboys under Jason Garrett have probably suffered way too long. And I say that mercifully because I know, as a big Tony Romo fan, how undeniably painful it was to watch this team not go further than the NFC Divisional Round. And I'm glad that the Cowboys finally stepped up, or Jerry Jones, actually, I should say, stepped up and said to cut the cord with Jason Garrett, because now this allows Mike McCarthy, who was an unbelievable coach for the Green Bay Packers, to come in and step in to try to change that franchise around. Do I like the signing? I think I do. I think he's better than Jason Garrett, at least. It's just, I don't know how Mike McCarthy will be. I mean, you look at the reaction around the league, it's kind of 50-50. Fans have been really split 50-50. I think the Cowboys fans are excited more or less, but the biggest question is how is Mike McCarthy going to transition from what he did with Green Bay to the Dallas Cowboys? But also at the same time, Mike McCarthy knows that he has to change stuff around. Now, I saw in Good Morning Football that he really was trying to change up his coaching schemes. He invited guys to his house. They would watch the Sunday games or whatever. They draw up charts and everything in schemes, on plays, and he would use different kinds of technologies to look at those plays. And he's trying to get with the times of like the new coaching technologies and new coaching ways that help the league kind of move on, or help the league develop for their players. Mike McCarthy, he has to kind of come in here and say, we got to change this around, we got to do this, but ultimately, I want to be able to mold this team into what I think can make them successful in the NFC East, which is honestly the most important part. If you're looking at the big picture for the Dallas Cowboys, the first goal you want is to win the NFC East decisively. And I mean decisively because this season for the NFC East was an absolute terrible season for the entire NFC East. And I hate that because you look at how the NFC was so competitive in every single other division besides the NFC East. Maybe the NFC South, but the Buccaneers and the Falcons were kind of like rearing their heads later on in the season. And then, so the Saints did win that division decisively, but the NFC North, the NFC West was like literally anybody's game at that point. And now it's the Dallas Cowboys and Mike McCarthy to figure out what is going to win in the NFC East decisively. All right, now that we got some of that coaching matters out of the way, let's look at the wild card round results, which I'm sure most of you probably watch these games anyway, but looking at these scores, we got the first one with the Bills and Texans. Texans winning 22-19. This was a huge game. The Bills were up by 16-0 in the first half, and then the Texans just completely turned around, scored 22 points, and the Bills were only able to score 3 more. Oh, man, what a turnaround Bill O'Brien did. And this was a big deal because Bill O'Brien, for the longest time, was always doubted in the playoffs because he just could never get it done in the playoffs. For some reason, the Houston Texans could just not go any further against those big teams. This is a good game to kind of show that. But again, this is going to be a very hard next game for the Texans. The Texans are facing the Chiefs, which is going to be huge because this is the real deal for Bill O'Brien. Can he be able to make a shootout with Pat Mahomes? They won the regular season matchup against the Chiefs, surprisingly enough. But will it happen in the playoffs? That is a huge question for this Houston Texans team to answer. And I can't wait to see what happens because Bill O'Brien knows that he needs a much more better first half in that game than in the Bills game. Because he knows that if they don't score in the first half, Pat Mahomes is going to put up at least 20 on them. At least. because he's that kind of quarterback that every time I watch a Kansas City Chiefs game, Pat Mahomes always puts up at least 20 points by the end of the first quarter. That's how good he is, and that's how good that Chiefs offense is. The Texans need to know that, and they need to know that they need to score early, get up on the board early, and find a way to put this Chiefs team away. This is a huge game for the Texans. This is a huge game for Bill O'Brien. I can't really even make a prediction on this because I know it's going to be a shootout. I know whatever the score is going to be, it's going to be over any projection that's anybody's going to come out with. You better bet the over on this game because this is going to be an absolute shootout. And I can't wait because this game is going to be a classic. Now, the one thing I could see being a factor in this game is the Chiefs' defense. They were really, really stepped up in the later half of the season, which could be a problem for the Houston Texans. But if Deshaun Watson can put the team on his back like he did in that second half against the Bills, that will also be a big determining factor if the Texans can win this game. Either or, this game is going to be a huge shootout, and I can't wait to see what happens. I basically just went over that Chiefs and Texans game in the divisional round. Guess I don't have to do that anymore. Anyway, wildcard round, yeah, Texans win huge because the second half was dominated by Deshaun Watson, and Bill O'Brien found a way to get through that stingy Bills defense somehow in every which way, and the Bills just were absolutely shattered in that second half against that Texans defense. Everything changed in that second half for the Texans, and they really turned it around, took it to overtime, and they were able to win the game. Congrats to Bill O'Brien, and congrats to that Texans team because they needed a playoff win really badly with Bill O'Brien, and they finally got one. Next one, Titans winning against the Patriots. Yes, yes, yes. Finally, no more Patriots in the Super Bowl. Now, I know it sounds like I'm a Brady hater, and it sounds like I'm a Patriots hater, but it's just, come on. The dynasty's lasted for 20 years. When is it ever going to stop? Like, I love what the Patriots have done throughout this dynasty. I love what Bill Belichick has done, and there's never going to be a dynasty like this Patriots dynasty was. There is absolutely nobody that's going to triumph over this Patriots dynasty. I don't ever see it happening in sports history ever again. I love that and I respect that. But 20 years, like, just give a team a chance after like 10, you know? And finally, the Titans were the ones who knocked them out. And it's kind of weirdly fitting, I guess, for this Titans team. These two teams have really been going at it for the past 2 years. I mean, last year, Mike Vrabel won a huge game against them as well. Last season, when all Brady faced was man coverage all day, and Brady actually had some capable receivers back then too, and the Titans were still able to win. That changed during the playoffs because the Patriots did face them in the playoffs again, but the Titans were also led by Marcus Mariota at that point, and then they kind of flopped in the offense. The Patriots defense was really good that game. Patriots were able to go on and go to the Super Bowl, win another ring, right? This time it's different. Patriots offense is not the same as it used to be. Titans defense has stepped up this season, which I said it would be too. And then once Ryan Tannehill took the helm of the quarterback, everything changed on the offense for the Titans. And that's exactly what the Titans needed. Now that that's happened, they are on a roll. And I knew that as soon as they got to the playoffs that they were going to be a dangerous team to face, no matter who was going to face them. And the Patriots faced them first, and they lost. And that's how good this Titans team is. This Titans team, I'm telling you, is going to be a very, very tough contender to take down because they're that good. Even though for a 9-7 team to go into this playoffs, they're a pretty good team. You can't underestimate them. Next game was on Sunday, Vikings and Saints. Another classic between the Vikings and Saints. 2 years ago, it was the Minneapolis Miracle. 10 years ago, it was Brett Favre being stupid and throwing a pick, allowing the Saints to win in overtime. This time, they go to overtime, and the Vikings win from a touchdown. And now we're saying, what are the overtime rules going to be at this point? 10 years ago between these two teams, the overtime rule was, as soon as you get any single point in overtime, you win the game. Saints got the ball first, they took a field goal, they won the game. Vikings got the ball first in this overtime, they scored a touchdown and won the game. Saints didn't even touch the ball. at some point, I bet you the Saints are going to petition just to another overtime rule at this point. I don't know. It's just every single year, it's like something has to happen to the Saints for them not to go to the playoffs or not go further in the playoffs. And it's just, man, I don't know how the Saints fans could take this anymore. They go to the playoffs pretty much every other season with Drew Brees, and they just can't do anything because they get screwed over somehow. Oh, well. Unfortunately for the Saints, but great job for the Vikings. I mean, Kirk Cousins balled out in this game, and I love it because I love Kirk Cousins ever since he was in Washington. I'm a big fan of his. Great game for him. The completion percentage wasn't really that great, but 242 yards, the touchdown, and that huge completion at the end of during overtime near the end of the game, and then the completion to Kyle Rudolph, the fade in the end zone. I mean, he, despite his numbers not being that great on paper, he really balled out. I mean, some of those throws, those one-on-one matchups, he placed those balls perfectly to his receivers, and he really put the team, he really made a statement in that game for what kind of quarterback he is for this team. So I'm glad the Vikings and Kirk Cousins got a win for themselves there. And now they go on to the divisional round. Seahawks winning against the Eagles 17-9. This to me is not a surprise. The Eagles, again, I even said this. I said this before the playoffs started that no matter who was going to win the NFC East, they were going to fall in the wild card round. And I say that because the NFC East was just, I alluded to that earlier. It's just, it was terrible. The Eagles were mediocre. The Cowboys were terrible in the later half of the season. They just kept taking loss after loss. And at some point, no matter who was going to win that division, they were going to go up against huge teams in the NFC that were just going to be way too much for them to handle. And it didn't help that the Philadelphia Eagles also lost Carson Wentz during the game. And they had to resort to Josh McCown, of all guys. They were able to score 9 points, but that's not going to be enough against the Seattle Seahawks team led by Russell Wilson. And that's exactly what happened. 17-9 final score. Seahawks move on, and the Eagles go home. Let's look at the divisional round. Divisional round previews. Vikings, 49ers. Vikings coming in as the 6th seed, 49ers as the 1st seed. That game is the first on Saturday at 3:35 p.m. Central Time, 4:35 Eastern Time. 49ers will be home for this one. They have home field advantage. Vikings have to know that the 49ers defense is going to step up this game. I know that they were kind of weak in the later half of the season, but the Vikings know that they are going to step up in this game. And I think Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins are going to look at the film as much as they possibly can and find a way to stop them, because this 49ers team is dangerous. They're really dangerous, and they might be one of the favorites to go to the Super Bowl. But if the Vikings can figure out how this defense works and what they will do coming into this game and try to combat that with their running games and their play action schemes with Kirk Cousins, they can make a statement. On the other side of the ball, the Vikings defense is going to have a challenge against Garoppolo. But I think that this Vikings defense is really good, and they showed it against that Saints team last week too. So I think that this is going to be a huge game for the Vikings, a huge statement game for the Vikings defense if they can get it done against the 49ers. 49ers are at home. They have home field advantage. They have all the momentum coming in. They had the bye. They got to rest. Now they know that they cannot take their foot off the gas pedal. The 49ers know that they cannot take their foot off the gas pedal against this very good Vikings defense, and their defense needs to step up against this Vikings offense. They're going to look at the film against Kirk Cousins too and know that Kirk Cousins is going to put the team on his back at some points and make some crazy good throws. And I bet you Richard Sherman and his cornerback crew are going to be looking at the film and seeing what they can do to combat against these Vikings receivers. All right, let's move on now to the Titans and Ravens. This one also will be at 8:15 Eastern Time on Saturday, 7:15 Central. This is a Ravens team that is very dangerous coming into these playoffs, and everybody knows that they're going to be dangerous. But at the same time, you also have this Titans team that I alluded to earlier in the show that they are going to also be a very dangerous team to contend with. Titans are not going to be going down so easily. I can guarantee you that. The problem is the Ravens offense with their running style offense is also going to be very hard to handle. And I'm not sure if the Titans could do that. I mean, every single defense or top tier running defense that the Ravens have faced have all pretty much had the same result happen to them. Their opponents have had still no answer to the Ravens running offense, and it seems like it just won't stop. I'm not sure if the Titans can match up with that. I think they'll make it tough for the Ravens, but for me, there's just too many weapons on this Ravens team for me to say that the Titans will be able to win this game. I think they will make it close, but I think the Ravens just have too many different weapons on offense. Their defense is pretty good too. I wouldn't underestimate them if I was Ryan Tannehill. But because it's the playoffs and because this Titans team is still dangerous in this playoffs, I think the Ravens will win possibly by 3 or 7. I think it's going to be very close. I think it could be a game-winning decider, honestly. But I just can't see this Ravens team winning, or I can't see this Ravens team losing this early in the playoffs against this Titans team. Next one on Sunday, the 2 Sunday games, they start at 3:05 Eastern Time. Texans and Chiefs starting off Sunday. It is going to be at Arrowhead. It's a rematch of the regular season matchup. It's going to be close, and I'm going to tell you to just bet the over on this game because this game is going to be very good. And I already previewed this matchup already, basically. So you could just got to go back and retrack, but it's going to be a high flying shootout between these two teams again, and I can't wait to see what happens in Arrowhead. I can't really even pick a winner because it's just going to be that close. Most people do have the Chiefs just winning by, I don't know, like 10 or 7. That's understandable because you have Pat Mahomes at the helm, but I wouldn't underestimate Deshaun Watson after what he did in the second half against the Bills. I can't underestimate him after what he did against the Chiefs in the regular season. When Deshaun Watson realizes that his team is in a corner or behind or has their back against the wall, he seems to just put his team on his back and just do unbelievable plays. He looks like a Russell Wilson out there. Maybe even a better Russell Wilson if he turns into that kind of quarterback. So I definitely wouldn't underestimate him. And then our last game is the Seahawks and Packers. This will be a great game. 6:40 Eastern Time is this one at Lambeau Field. It's a reverse of the 2014 matchup, if you remember that, but because that one was in CenturyLink. That was when the Seahawks came back in the fourth quarter, took it to overtime, and won the game. Eventually, they would go on to the Super Bowl as well. This Seahawks and Packers teams are very closely matched up. But you will have a Seahawks team that is injured at the running back position, and it was clear in that Seahawks and Eagles game that Russell Wilson wants to throw the ball now more, and he was actually the rushing leader in that game as well. So now the Packers kind of are coming into this game knowing that the game plan is going to be that Seattle's going to throw the ball and then Russell Wilson's going to be their leading rusher. So now Green Bay can adjust their defense to that, and the aspects of the Seahawks not having a running game and relying on Russell Wilson to use his legs might just help the Packers defense in that case. But then again, the Packers defense was also kind of bad against the run this season. I believe they were one of the worst teams when they gave up yards per carry. So they have a challenge against them no matter who's going to be running the ball. It also just makes it easier for coaching-wise to adjust to whatever the offense is going to be for the Seahawks, because now for the Packers it's a little bit more predictable in this scenario. Now, because this is also Lambeau Field, this also gives another advantage to Aaron Rodgers because, Aaron Rodgers is really good at Lambeau Field, and this entire Packers team is usually really good at Lambeau Field. I think that because of all these advantages, I think the Packers will win. Again, the Seahawks will make it close. I don't think it's going to be like 2014 just because if the Seahawks had a really good run game, if Chris Carson was healthy, I think they would make it a lot more closer, but there's just too many questions on the running game for this game for me to confidently say. Now, I could be completely wrong, and the Seahawks could just hand it off to Marshawn Lynch on every other down and just completely decimate the Packers defense. That could happen for all I know. But if you're looking at the tape from just the Eagles game, that might not happen. and they most likely would just give it to Lynch in the red zone, which would be understandable considering they need to pay for their mistake the last time. But so they're going to just give it to him every time in the red zone, maybe even on third down if they needed it on a third and short situation. And I can't wait to see this one at Lambeau Field. That's going to be good. So that'll do it for the show this week. It is divisional rounds coming at you this weekend, and we can't wait to see what happens in this great NFL playoffs. And we can't wait to see what the results of this. We'll see you next week. For now, we hand the ball over to you. We'll see you next week.